Hi, my name is Arthur Vinci. I'm a writer, producer, and director with a background in independent film. And this is the first episode of a series, or hopeful series, called Worth Another Look, where I talk a little bit about some films that I think are worth another look. These are films that either came out and didn't receive a lot of love at the time, or maybe they were very well received, but for some reason just disappeared into the mists of time. These films are not without their flaws, and we'll talk a little bit about those as well. But they are certainly, especially for those of you who are making films, worth studying to see what they got right, what they got wrong, and how what they were doing is worth, maybe stealing for your own work. Now, The Postman came out in 1997, the same year that a small little tiny film by James Cameron named Titanic came out. Maybe you've heard of it. And it's based on a David Brin sci-fi novel that was published in 1980 or 81, I believe. The Postman takes place in the year 2013. America has fallen apart. It is basically balkanized into a bunch of walled communities, and in between a group of fascists run free. The glue of modern society, technological and cultural and economic, has fallen apart. And the fascists, who are led by General Bethlehem, played by the awesome Will Patton, underrated character actor, essentially run a protection racket. They promise to keep these communities safe from other bad guys in exchange, of course, for food and whatever else they want. They basically go from town to town and rape and pillage and recruit members into their ranks. They are Negan before Negan, if you will. Kevin Costner stars as an actor who's now, of course, extremely unemployed, and he goes from town to town with his donkey, giving mediocre Shakespeare performances in exchange for a little bit of food and board. So he's used to putting on performances and lying. He is not a fighter.
Comes to destiny. I said, till Burnham Wood comes to Destiny. Thank you. Okay, now.
And in fact, one of the best things about this movie is that it does not, I really don't think it glorifies fighting, even when the cause is just. He gets caught up by Bethlehem and recruited into his gang unwillingly, and then manages to escape. After he escapes, he finds an abandoned postal truck, steals the now dead postal carrier's uniform, and realizes he has come upon what could be a great scam.
I'm a representative of the United States government, authorized by Order 417 of the Restored Congress to reestablish communication route in Idaho and Lower Oregon.
What's that mean in English?
I'm your postman.
And it works. But something happens along the way. People actually take him seriously, and he realizes, oh my God, I actually have to follow through on this. I actually have to pretend as though there's a reconstituted United States and a reconstituted post office, and I have to be a representative that I never intended to be. So along the way, he meets two extremely important figures, and this is where the film is both good and bad. The first is Ford Lincoln Mercury, played by the always awesome Lorenz Tate, and the other is Abby, played by Olivia Williams. I have to say that the cast is uniformly good across the board. It's directed by Kevin Costner, and you could tell that he spent a good amount of time working with the other actors to craft believable, strong performances from them. Even Will Patton's kind of chewing the scenery, but it doesn't feel too large for the character. He plays it exactly like this kind of petty jerk who managed to get his hands on some power when things went bad. Again, think of Negan before Negan.
You want a war? You want a war? I'll give you a war!
Ford Lincoln Mercury end up setting up a new version of the post office, still believing the lie that Costner is this guy who is now part of this new government. Suddenly, by just carrying letters back and forth between these different separated communities, he becomes a force for revolutionary change, an anti-fascist force. Now, of course, this creates the conditions for a new civil war between the fascists led by Bethlehem and Costner and his ragtag group of postal carriers. So if this all sounds a bit ridiculous and maybe a bit sort of over the top, I think it's worth thinking about it as a mythological movie. So if you look at movies that are either directly inspired by mythology or are creating their own sort of mythology, I'm thinking now of Tarsem Singh's Immortals, the really excellent 5.5-hour adaptation of the Mahabharata, Lord of the Rings. Like, these movies operate on a fantastic level. They are not necessarily supposed to be taken literally. Another good example would be the Wuxia films, where you have people flying around in the air. However, just because you're not supposed to take something literally doesn't mean you're not supposed to take it seriously. So keep that mythological framework in mind, that fantastic framework in mind when you're approaching The Postman, and you will start to see that it actually works much better. It's about the things that knit communities together, communication, and not literally the post office, but the whole idea of being able to reach out between different people and share information and share cultures and share stories with each other. I feel like that movie has only gained relevance now that we're living in an age where fascism is on the rise across the globe and threatens to split and divide us. So this idea of needing a strong communitarian force to counterbalance that is not anything to sneeze at. It's shot beautifully, by the way, and it has the sort of scope and feel of a Western in that you are often taking in these, amazingly big vistas. And I think that actually works again within this kind of fantastic framework. It's sort of showing you this huge world. Now, it does have its flaws, obviously. It is a little too long, and towards the last, I think, 20 minutes of the movie or so, it kind of spins, it kind of runs the train off the tracks a bit. It gets a little too literal minded for its own good. Another thing that it kind of acknowledges and kind of doesn't acknowledge is that the two people who do really the bulk of the grunt work in setting up this postal system, both Abby and Ford Lincoln Mercury, are not given the credit that they're due. And of course, that is in perfect keeping with American myth making, because Ford Lincoln Mercury is a black man and Abby is a white woman. And the person who the movie is named after is the Postman, who is portrayed, glowingly by Kevin Costner.
I don't want to be a part of your army.
My army?
And again, his concern about violence is actually something I think that makes the film somewhat exceptional. When violence happens on screen, and it is not something to celebrate, even when it happens to bad people. It is something that's tragic. And I find that's actually gives it a kind of moral compass that other films that depict revolution don't have necessarily. The first half hour is a bit of a slog as Costner's character is put through the ringer by Bethlehem's army. The early meetings between the two of them feel like a little bit of filler. You just hang in there. As soon as the movie kind of hits that first turning point where he runs away, the movie really takes off. I'd love to hear what you have to say about the movie. Let me know. Thanks a lot.